Chris, welcome to Careers That Matter. This is a program that we developed because I'm in a unique position of talking to people like you for a variety of our shows, and you have unique careers that actually matter. What is your job right now? And then let's get into what was the path, your career path that led you to the point where you are now.
I've never talked about this topic before, but I'll do my best. So what I do right now is I'm a plastic materials expert. I'm a scientist. So companies like Apple or Hewlett Packard or Procter& and Gamble come to me when they need a revolutionary new plastic or when they have some problem and they can't solve it. So even the Fortune 100 with thousands of scientists can't solve the problem, and they come to me and I help them.
How did you get into this work? Because what you're talking about is highly specialized work where you're understanding chemical composition of a what has become a very complex substance.
Right. Well, I got into it because a professor called Norman Billingham interested me in plastics. He said there's way more demand for plastic experts than there is supply. So that's a good area to be in. And he was very persuasive because he had a bottle of cider in his hand when he said it. This was like the career day at a university where you got to pick your minor subject. I was studying chemistry, and he said, study chemistry with polymer science. And so I said, all right, you've got the beer and or the cider, and you've got a persuasive argument. So that's what I did. And he was a wonderful teacher. He was able to distill everything down to make it extremely simple. And that's something you notice about true experts. They don't hit you with fancy words. They can make everything seem very, very simple, even to the layperson. So he inspired me and taught me a lot of what I know.
Okay, so let's go a little bit further back in your life because the majority of people who watch this program are younger. They're graduating from, secondary level education, whether it's in England or the United States and Canada. And for a lot of people, they think, whoa, okay, that looks pretty complex. How do I get there? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And what were some of those influences that started to make you go, okay, here's how the world works, and I want to try and figure it out? Because you must have had that kind of, upbringing or environment that you lived in to make you open to the possibility that you could start to figure out the mysteries of life.
Interesting. Wow, that's a pretty deep question. All right, so I grew up in England, but I am American, and I had a stepdad who was a famous professor. And whenever we would have a problem, he wouldn't help us. He would just say lateral thinking. That's all he would say, lateral thinking. And then we would have to go and work it out for ourselves. So he was a big believer in you working it out for yourself, using your own brain, not having your parents spoon feed you with everything, which people tend to do today. So that was part of it, and probably a desire to impress him because he was a very smart and famous guy. He was an advisor to the UK government and Tony Blair and so forth. So that's probably part of it, a desire to impress your parents and somebody who encouraged you and somebody who told you how thinking can really pay dividends. That's part of it. And to be honest, if you look at the number one predictor of success in jobs today, it's IQ, right? And that's something which is about 80% hereditary. So part of it is just being given or, biologically being set up to be able to think well. And then, but IQ on its own is not enough. If I've done a lot of studying this, I've read hundreds of articles about IQ and creativity. And so if you can have IQ and that will allow you to understand things and learn them quickly, but without creativity, you can't really solve problems that other people can't solve. So that's really the crux of my career, is having the IQ and at some point realizing I was able to solve problems other people couldn't, and then realizing that was my skill and building upon that. You can't just do it in a vacuum, right? You need to hear the problems and you need to have the foundation, as you were just alluding to. You need to have that scientific foundation to be able to use those skills, but you need the IQ and the creativity, and that's something that you just are fortunate enough to have or not. Other people are, 10 times as strong as I am, and they play American football and make more money than I do. So everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully you can find which ones suit you and how to maximize them.
Did you have an interest in the sciences when you were in, I forget what the level is called in the UK, but what would be the equivalent of high school here in North America?
Yeah, I had good teachers. I like chemistry and physics and biology. I took all of them, but chemistry was probably my favorite. Probably the secret is I had a string of incredibly good chemistry teachers. I mean, I still remember their names today, and they were extremely good. I never had a bad chemistry teacher, and that made the subject easy, which of course made it very appealing because it was easy because it was taught well and made interesting.
Good teachers make a big difference, don't they?
They made all the difference in this case. If I look back, I had just spectacular teachers. Especially there was one called Dr. Clifford, who I'd love to get in touch with. I've been trying to track him down just to thank him personally.
So, part of that teaching environment is, I think, is that you're in a classroom environment or with a teacher who says it's okay to not know the answer right at the moment because that's why you're here.
I found the most inspirational thing about teachers are the ones who were really many levels above what they were teaching, right? So my best teacher, Dr. Clifford, had a PhD, although he definitely didn't need it for teaching chemistry. And you could just sense that deep knowledge. It wasn't like they were faking it or transferring on the same level to you of what their understanding was. He had a deeper understanding, and you could feel that. It wasn't really tangible. You couldn't touch it, but you could tell this guy was really a master and really enjoyed what he did. So for me, that was most influential.
And so, did that give you the confidence that you needed to start to take on higher level academic challenges as far as being able to now understand a far more complex element of chemistry?
Whew.
Well,
I guess
think
it's like
confidence
this.
plays an important part in our lives.
Yes, I have a section about confidence in my book, Innovation Abyss, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about confidence. So if you're overly confident, you say, here, follow me, but you've got no idea where you're going and everyone jumps off a cliff. And then you have other people who are not confident enough. So I've literally been in a meeting with certain nationalities tend to have less confidence or less extroversion, right? So they'll literally sit there and you can see in their eyes, they have the answer to the question, but they won't say anything. They won't help anybody by sharing it. So for me, the ideal amount of confidence is the confidence that exactly matches your ability, right? If it's too high or too low compared to your ability, you're not doing anyone any favors. So it's okay to have high confidence. I'm very confident in science because I'm great at chemistry and polymer science. I'm proud to say that, but I'm also proud to say I have no sense of direction. If I hadn't been born in the age of GPS, I'd be lost all the time. I had a friend who said he was surprised I found my way home from work after work, right? So this is being aware of your strengths and your weaknesses. And I saw some very, very profound videos from, who's that guy, Robert with the unpronounceable last name from the Shark Tank. So him and these very, very famous, and Mark Cuban said the same thing. These very famous people say you should find what you're good at and train that thing to become world class at it. Unfortunately, the school system teaches you the opposite. The school system tells you your handwriting's not very good. You should be focusing on your handwriting to bring it up to average. And that's completely wrong. You should find out what you're good at, like chemistry, right? And then say, hey, this is what's easy for me. This is what feels good. I'm going to make myself the world's best chemist. So actually, I'm not a very good chemist, but there's an example, right? You should find what you're good at and hone yourself to be the best instead of spotting your weaknesses and trying to become average. Because later in life, you can join a team, right, of people who complement you and fill in your weaknesses. It's a waste of time to be filling in your own weaknesses.
So where you got convinced to study chemistry? Where'd you go to university?
Sussex University on the south coast in England. It was a very good university to go to. Really had
So
good
you go
teaching
through.
staff.
So you go through that first level. What you graduate with? What kind of degree?
A degree in chemistry with polymer science. So I graduated with that, and then I wanted to do research. What I found, and this is an important message for your viewers, I found education to be extremely boring because I'm creative, and education is about teaching you things that people did 100 years ago, right? You repeat the same experiment that somebody did 50 years ago or 100 years ago. It's repetition. There's no creation in it, and it's really boring. And what's ironic is this, right? You need a good degree to get sponsored to do your PhD, right? You need to have a good degree grade to go on. But the degree grade is a degree that says I'm able to learn a load of nonsense without losing my mind. That's what a degree is, right? It's a piece of paper that says I can learn a bunch of nonsense without losing my mind. And that is exactly the opposite of what you need to do a PhD or a master's. To start doing research, you need to be creative. You don't have to be good at remembering a bunch of facts. You need to be able to create. And those people are the same people who are driven mad by all this repetition in the earlier part of their career. So if you're creative, you have to somehow get through that extremely boring part of learning facts in order to qualify to then go and do research where you're really building something and making something. So the education system is set up incorrectly. The requirement to get to a PhD is to be useless at doing a PhD.
It is ironic. is almost an oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what was your thesis, and where did you complete your PhD?
I did the PhD at the University of Sussex also, and
Okay.
that was with Norman Billingham and Steve Arms, and it was on electrically conducting polymers, so plastics that conduct electricity. They have a chemical structure that conducts electricity, which is really rare. So polyaniline and polypyrrole would be two examples of those. And I really invented some new things. That's probably the first time where I really invented something that the world's best scientists had missed, right? So I was able to invent a polymer that all of them had failed to come up with, and I came up with it in my spare time and published it. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I'm not even graduated yet, and I've come up with a breakthrough. So
and so you graduate with having completed this with your PhD thesis. There's a lot of people who graduate with PhDs and can't get a job. Were you able to secure employment?
Well, the funny thing was, the only reason I did a PhD was that I couldn't get a job. I was sponsored by a company called Courtaulds for my undergraduate degree. And they said, we'll employ you when you're finished, right? We sponsor you. You come and see us every summer. We think you're a great guy. We'll give you a job. So I got my degree, and they said, there's a recession on. There's a hiring freeze. We can't hire you, but we can give you a little bit of money to keep on going and do a PhD. And then we'll pick you up in 3 years when you're finished, right? And the recession's over with. So that's how I ended up doing a PhD, was that there were no jobs when I came out with my degree.
Huh. But were you, did they pick you up after you completed your
They
PhD?
didn't, ironically, but I got a job, no
Huh.
problem, somewhere else. So I actually had a job before I'd finished my PhD. So that was pretty awful. I had my first job, and I had to go home after my new job and finish writing up my thesis, to get the paperwork done and get my...
So what was that first job? And then what did your career path look like, and where did it take you?
Place called Cookson in the UK, which is a centre of research for a large international organization, which had Vesuvius and various other subsidiaries. It was basically a holding company for a bunch of big companies in metals, in plastics, and so forth. And I got to do research there, but I had a Swedish girlfriend. So I was there about a year, and I did invent a revolutionary new process, which they patented. So I was very proud of that, to be able to really come up with a breakthrough in my first year. That was on tableware glaze. When you have plates and you have this shiny layer on a plate when you're eating off a dinner plate, that's called a glaze. That's the transparent layer. And I invented a revolutionary way of making that. So we replaced the formulation that had 15 additives with just one additive that did the same job. And but then I had a Swedish girlfriend.
So, we'll get to the Swedish girlfriend in a moment. But when you developed that glaze for the company, you as the inventor, what's your financial benefit for having created a product that the company benefits from?
None. And that's an interesting point. The patent system was written so that you or I, if we invented something, would get the money in our own pocket. And that system has been hijacked. So if you read the legal scholars, and they talk about this, and the way it happened was this, right? You get a new job, and your employer forces you to sign away all your money or your patent rights that were due to you, right? That's what the system was created for, was to reward inventors for doing that. And instead, you promise to give all of that to whoever's employed you, and they basically rip you off. And so unless you're financially, independently wealthy and you don't need a job, you're forced to sign away all of the fruits of your creativity. And that's not what the patent system was invented for. So I got no financial benefit. In fact, when I left the company, they took my name off the patent, although I was the inventor of it. So that's pretty common as well.
So as a result, your loyalty to that company is only job deep. And when your heart is calling you to a lovely young woman that you want to have a relationship with in Sweden, you leave.
Yeah.
What did you
I did
do
like
in
my
Sweden?
job.
Yeah.
I did like my job, but I had I promised her that I was going to move to Sweden, and I always keep my promises. That's
And you liked her more.
Yeah, I suppose so. The thing is, you can find a job anywhere. If you're good, you'll find a job anywhere, but you can't find the right person anywhere. So I had to give that a shot.
So what did you do in Sweden when you were there? What was
I got a
the work that you
postdoc
were
at the KTH, which is the very famous university in Stockholm. And that was great because I was able to expand my network, meet new people, interact with the university people there, and learn a lot. So that was a great call. And then I was thrust into a new field. I wasn't working on conducting polymers anymore. This was all about biodegradable polymers. They were inventing plastics that biodegrade. And so I was behind the curve there, right? They said, here, do this. And they gave me something extremely boring to do, which they've been doing for 20 years. They've been publishing the same nonsense for 20 years. It was a waste of money and time. And I cannot bear that kind of research. So I decided to make my own polymers that no one had ever made before. And this is really something I'm proud of. I wanted to make something which was safe in the body, right? This is for implanting in the body. So I went to the pharmacy and I asked for a list of all the food contact approved things, all the things you can put in Sprite or Coke or food, right? Things you're allowed to eat. So I got a list of every chemical, they're called E numbers in Europe, every chemical you can eat. And then I worked out how to polymerize them together. I picked a couple of these and reacted them together to make a totally new polymer that nobody had made before. And this would be a polymer that when it broke into pieces, they were edible pieces, which we know are safe. So I made that polymer and published that. That was something I was really proud of.
Did that ever get produced? Did that plastic ever see its way into the production chain?
I've had a lot of interest from different people who really thought the work was terrific, but it hasn't been commercialized. That was just something I did. That was only 1 year, that postdoc. And that was an interesting thing, right? Because the frontier, let's say the frontier is here, right? It's like a race. And you have an idea, and then you go and check the literature. It's already been done. You haven't caught up with the leader, right? So you've got this idea, and because I'm starting in a new area, I'm back here, and I'm catching up. And so I have an idea that was done 2 years ago. And now I have an idea, that was published a year ago. And now my next idea was just published 3 months ago, right? And now I realize I'm nearly there, right? I'm nearly there where my next idea will be something new. So I went through that procedure in a year, getting myself up to speed in a new area. I read a lot like you do, and then my creativity to come up with something which is a breakthrough.
Where'd you go from Sweden?
After Sweden was Italy, because there was a big recession there. I worked for Electrolux Frigidaire, and there was a big recession, a lot of layoffs. And the only way to keep my job was to move to Italy, near Venice. So I lived there for a year.
And from there? Because I think one of the interesting things is people may not realize that as a scientist, you become quite a world traveler.
I did, yeah. I think it's been an important part of my career, because if you stay in one company, you get very blinkered and you end up thinking you're the best, but that's only because you haven't compared yourself to the best outside. You can't stay hidden within your castle. When I was at BASF, a lot of the people there were deluded. They thought they were the best in the world. That's only because they were stuck behind their thick walls, patting each other on the back and feeling good about themselves, but they hadn't really gone out and met people from outside and compared themselves to the world's best. So I think that's important, to get out there, interact with different people, learn a lot, and it requires more work, right? It's like you said, you need to be brave. We had a discussion before, you need to be brave to do it. And it takes a lot of work. Imagine you throw away all your friends, you don't know anybody, you don't know the language even, you don't know how to find an apartment, you don't know how the tax system works, you don't know the area of science, and you throw yourself into that and you immerse yourself in it and come out a stronger person. But it's an incredible amount of work to do that again and again, to move country and move field. And at the end of it, you know things that no one else in the world knows.
Well, that sounds exciting to me, but I also appreciate the fact that it's a tremendous amount of effort. So you wound up in Germany, and now you're in the United States. What brought you to the United States? And what brought you to the United States?
Well, the first part of my career was, I like to say, following women around Europe. I was always in some relationship with a woman from another country. So people sometimes say, this is some great strategic career you've had, but it was completely by chance that I ended up moving country. Moving to America was for a job, though. So I was offered an interesting job in Mississippi, and I went to work for a plastics company there for a while, and as a chief scientist. So, and that was again in a new area. That was a new type of chemistry I'd never worked with before.
Well, you're not in Mississippi any longer. What brought you from Mississippi to where you are now?
Well, the next job offer was in Soho, Manhattan. So I worked with a minerals company, and that mineral was used as an additive for plastics. So that was like a nanotechnology. And I was a chief technology officer at that company. It was a publicly traded company. So that was a new thing for me, working in the New York area, and again, with a new technology. I had to get up to speed and become the world expert in that technology.
Well, you're not in New York anymore either. So
No, I'm in Cincinnati, near Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So I moved there primarily to be near my father, because he lives in the area, and then found a job in the area. And now, since then, I've left the corporate world because I realized that the corporate world is just not the right place for a person like me.
But that puts you squarely into this place where you are a consultant. And yes, right. You have a variety of number of companies, like large companies, that come to you for expertise. but it's a
Right.
much more tenuous situation. You don't have a guaranteed paycheck. What has been the biggest change in moving away from working for a company that they go, here you go, here's your paycheck, here's your badge to get in and out of the company, your phone, and so on, and now you're responsible for all of that as well as cultivating new business.
Yeah. Well, it's scary in the beginning, that's for sure. But afterwards, it ends up to have a few major advantages, right? One is that you're not stuck in meetings all day. So companies reward people who are, they're good at hanging around the water cooler. They're good at playing the social game, which I'm not good at. I have no interest in that. I want to get in, hear a problem, solve the problem, and find the next problem. That's me. I don't want to spend my day in meetings and sucking up to the right people or playing any of these politics games. So that's, for me, that's a big relief. I can use my time better. Also, no matter how big the company you work for is, even if it's BASF, you can't use all of your creativity, right? They're only working in certain fields, and you're only supposed to work in a certain field. So if you're working in the BASF polymers division and you have an idea for their fertilizer division, they don't want to hear about it. They're like, what are you doing messing in my area for, right? You're siloed whenever you're in a big company and unable to use all of your skills. And when it comes to job security, the consulting job actually has a lot more security than a regular job, because a regular job, you have the false sense of security that, oh, well, Volkswagen will never lay anybody off, or BASF will never lay anyone off. But they do. They regularly, I've seen this in my career, these big companies lay people off. Now I have about 8 different sources of income, right? So statistically, the chance of losing 8 sources of income at any one time are extremely low. You end up with more job security by far than I had before.
Okay, so what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, it's not like this day where I'm doing YouTube interviews. It's I sit at my computer on my comfy couch, which is behind me, and people write to me with their problems and phone me up, and I help them out. I try not to travel because I don't enjoy it. People imagine a consultant must be traveling all the time, but I just love sinking my teeth into juicy problems and helping people out. A lot of people like to work on a project basis and charge by the hour, and I never do that, because people who charge by the hour never want to be finished, right? What's their motivation for ever solving your problem if you're paying them by the hour? I like to work where somebody gives me a problem, I tell them whether I can help and a fixed cost, and then we move on from there. My more rewarding clients are done on a retainer basis, where you have a certain payment per month and they have access to me pretty much unlimited, depending on what their problems are and what kind of help they need.
So the most interesting element that I hear is that you get to let your mind just dig into a challenge and seek out the answer, which can be fraught with an awful lot of shortcomings and missed shots, I guess, before you find the actual target. Is that rewarding, or is it also frustrating, especially when somebody's paying you to try and find the answer?
Well, I don't take jobs where I can't help, because it's not gratifying for me and it doesn't make sense for the customer, and you don't end up with a good reputation. So I'm in a position where I only have to take jobs where I like the people and I like the challenge and I know that I can help them. I have to be at least 80% sure before I'll even take the job. And to your point about guessing, it reminds me of, it's not, Gary Player wasn't the first person who said it, but somebody commented that he holed this bunker shot. It went right in the hole, and they said that was a lucky shot. And he said, it's a funny thing, the more I practice, the luckier I get. So it's the same thing with my area, right? My guesses are really, really good these days. They're not 100%, but they're very accurate. So recently I had a client come to me. They wanted to create a revolutionary new material. Nobody had managed to make it in 30 years. And I wrote down 3 lines, sent an email, and it worked. And I said, here, try this, and it worked. And that's it. We've patented that now.
And they paid you for it.
Yep, that's right.
Isn't that wonderful? If there's a young, aspiring student who loves science and chemistry and they go, your career sounds fascinating, I want to be you, what would you say is the most important element in the whole mix of your personality and your training experience that you would say, make sure you focus in on this if this is the kind of life that you want to have?
Right. Well, as I said, to be successful, you need IQ, and at least what I do, IQ and creativity, and you have to be hardworking as well, right? So those are the 3 things which are proven. It's not just my theory, right? You can look at, Warren Buffett said it, but there are scientific studies proving that those are the 3 things you need. It's conscientiousness, openness, if you do the big 5 personality test, and an IQ. So you have to have those 3. And what I would say is, once you have those 3, Learn as much as you can, but don't just learn the standard stuff, right? You have to learn the fundamentals, but after that, don't fill your brain with nonsense, right? I go around looking for outliers, right? Let's say you do an experiment and it doesn't work. That's the experiment I'm interested in. The experiment that worked, I'm not interested in that. That was predictable. That's standard knowledge. I can find that in a book. Go and look for the outliers. So a lot of my breakthroughs have been experiments that didn't work, or some very strange piece of information. I remember my professor Norman Billingham showed me some special chemical in his office one time when I was about 25. And 30 years later, well, not 30 years later, 25 years later, I came up with an invention based on that chemical that he showed me, because I thought, wow, that's fascinating. I bet that will have a use. And I stored that away. So look for the outliers. Don't just look for the standard stuff that everyone knows.
One other thing, this is partly me speaking from my own experience, but I know that off camera we had this discussion before, is I think that it's vitally important to make sure that you can identify a community of people who are risk takers and who look for opportunities in life rather than for safe havens.
Right.
Because if you get into that community of people who are going, oh, no, or don't take the risk, or what do you know, or they're doubters or whatnot, it is such negative energy that it can hold you back.
Well, that's why I don't like the corporate scenario, because corporations are all about playing it safe and protecting the castle. They're not about, and that's why they're always beaten by some young upstart who does care and does have drive. If you look at, I've got a YouTube video on this, but if you look at the effectiveness of a group as you expand the group to more and more people, it goes down and you get to a point where hardly anyone's doing any work. And that's exactly how big companies are. It's about a couple % of everyone in a big company is actually delivering 50% of everything that company's. It's astonishing. Like 3% of the people in a giant company are delivering half of their whole output. It's that shocking. So everyone else is hanging around the water cooler and having coffee and stuck in meetings and talking about safety and other nonsense. So that's one thing, is to get out of the environment which is trying to pull you back with meetings and nonsense. And another thing is the education system. They've done a study that proves that teachers do not like creative students, right? So if you interview CEOs, they say the number one property we need from people is creativity. The computers can do everything else, right? The computers can do the regular paperwork and the number crunching, but creativity, they can't do it yet. So what we need is creative people. And then what you find when you look at the education system is the teachers are busy beating it out of them because they hate creative people. They say that they like creative students if you interview them, but if you actually measure it, they don't. Because a creative kid is asking questions, that's just interrupting the class. They're challenging you on stuff, and nobody wants that. They want 30 silent kids who sit there and go, yes, ma'am, and you get to the end of the lesson. That's the easiest thing for a teacher, and that's what they would like to see. So although they say they like creative children, they actually discourage it. And then you get out of your school, you go into a company, and they say, be creative, and you've just had it beaten out of you. So that's a problem. We need to change our education system.
So I'm kind of laughing about that because, of course, it's teachers that I want to have use this series to show to students about how they can pursue careers that make a difference and matter, and here we are. But there are, of course, creative teachers. Not all. I guess I want to be careful not to label all teachers as being as such, because you talked about the fact that you had teachers who opened up a world of possibilities to you as well.
Absolutely. They have actually measured, though, that the creative kids get worse grades. So it's not just a hypothetical discrimination, but on average, teachers don't appreciate the creative children as much as they should. So maybe there should be a separate streaming for that, because these people are different types of personalities and maybe deserve different treatment.
Well, I like hearing that because my grades in school were awful. I was so bored I couldn't believe it. And I was, like completely outside of the stream of whatever, but yet I love learning. So, I think that that's a vital component. I'm out of time. We've been talking for close to 29 minutes here, and and we can only hold people's attention for so long. But students who are interested, they can find you online. What's your website address in case anybody wants to?
It's phantomplastics.com, PHANTOM plastics.com, and I have a lot of information there. I have some training webinars if anyone wants to learn about plastics. There's $5,000 worth of free training there. You don't have to sign up or anything. I'm just trying to share the knowledge and inspire a younger generation.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time to do this.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Stu. Yes. I really appreciate it too.